Thanks for watching. Please take this time to join the notification gang. What are some serial killer facts about serial killers that you find extremely interesting? The Hillside Stranglers picked up a young woman to murder. Then they discovered that her father was Peole, a legendary Hollywood character actor. They let her go because they feared that killing a celebrity's daughter would bring too much attention down. In the John Wayne G case, there were so many bodies crammed underneath the house that the bodies melted together and the bones had to be sorted for more than 2 years to put together the full skeletons. Peewee Gaskins, most prolific serial killer in SC, drove around in a hearse with a bumper sticker that read "I haul dead people." He told people that he needed it to take the bodies of people he killed to his private cemetery. He claimed to have killed between 100 and 110 people. Jeffrey Dahmer, towards the end right before he got caught, had so many bodies in his apartment that he ran out of room and stored one victim in his bathtub. He proceeded to shower over him every day for a month. Think about that, straddling over a rotten corpse to get fresh and clean for the day. Unreal. When police eventually came to the house of Gein, they found an absolute pigsty. Gein had been living alone since the death of his brother in a barn fire. It's speculated that Gein may have killed him, and had let much of the house go into disrepair. They found countless body parts from his various grave-digging excursions, including a bag of wilted vaginas and, of course, the infamous skin lampshade and half-finished woman's suit made of human skin. There were maggots living in old dishes in the kitchen. It was the type of disorganized mess that you would expect from a man who spent his nights completely disconnected from reality. All except one room. His mother's room upstairs remained pristine, except for dust that had collected, and seemingly untouched from the time of her death years earlier. He had such a fear or respect for his mother that he was afraid to set foot in her room long after she had died. He claimed to hear her voice criticizing him from time to time. This was the central experience that inspired Norman Bates' character to maintain his mother's home image in Psycho. Also, a fun fact about Gein: in Taxi Driver, Travis Bickle makes an offhand comment when leaving a diner that he had a cup of coffee and a slice of apple pie with cheese on top. In exchange for details to investigators after his capture, Gein requested the same meal. Pedro Alonso Lopez pleaded guilty to the murders of 100-plus girls and only received a maximum sentence of 16 years, as that was the maximum possible sentence in Ecuador. He was released despite promising to continue killing, but disappeared shortly after. The serial killer Peole liked to pickle people in barrels stored in his basement. Someone figured it out, but they couldn't get him because he was fighting in World War I. By the time they tracked him down, he had disappeared and left a dead guy in his hospital bed. He supposedly joined the French Foreign Legion and deserted the two, and I think history loses track of him after that, with the exception of one possible sighting as a janitor in New York. The janitor disappeared before anyone could confirm it. I have a family member who briefly dated this guy. She almost but not quite fit the profile of his victims. One time when he picked her up, her adult son was visiting the house, met him, and shook his hand. He ghosted her after that. Also, my mum was living in a mobile home park in Wichita during BTK's killing spree. My dad was deployed overseas. They had a big German shepherd who she would put outside for a little bit every night before going to sleep, and she said for a while she had to bring him in early because he would just go crazy, barking, growling, and snarling every night. Shortly after he stopped doing that, there was a BTK murder not too far from the mobile home park. Scary stuff. Some older homes in Wichita have a second landline installed by the door because he was notorious for cutting phone lines. People would come home and check the line by the door, then the other line, just to reassure themselves. The Golden State Killer, known at the time as the East Area Rapist, would often break into the homes of couples, making the woman tie up the man. He would stack dishes on the back of the man and threaten that if he heard the dishes fall, He would kill everyone in the house, then he would rape the woman repeatedly and ransack the house for hours. At a community meeting about the rapist, a macho man stood up and went on a rant about how a real man would never let such a thing happen to him or his wife. The rapist proceeded to attack that man and his wife soon after, meaning he was attending the community meeting about himself. I am surprised we don't hear more about Robert Hanssen in popular culture. He would kidnap women and turn them loose in the Alaskan wilderness, where he would then hunt them down like animals and kill them. He didn't have the highest number of victims, but his method of hunting them for sport is absolutely insane. McCrea Edwards, he was a serial killer who worked for Caltrans. He'd kill his victims and then bury the bodies in places he would later help build the highways over. Not all his victims have been found, and many are very likely still under some of the California highways you may have driven over countless times. Albert Fish would stick needles into his pelvis when he was masturbating. Stick 'em so deep sometimes they would get stuck. He told this to police. They didn't believe him until they saw the X-ray. Dennis Rader, aka BTK, Bind Torture Kill, started communicating with police after years of silence in like 2004-ish. He had gone decades without being caught and once again started sending taunting letters and items to them. He asked them if he could be traced if he sent them his writings on a floppy disk, and they assured him through a communication in a newspaper that no, they couldn't trace him. He sent them a floppy disk and they found metadata linking to his church. He was arrested shortly thereafter. He was hurt that they would lie to him because he thought they had developed a rapport. Many years ago I read the entire police report on the Green River Killer. I was fascinated by his attempts to cover his tracks by buying new car tires and destroying shoes and getting new ones after murders, to avoid leaving traceable tracks behind. Also fascinating that he took the jewelry off his victims and left it in the ladies' restroom at his workplace and got off on seeing the found jewelry on various women around the office. Not necessarily the killer himself, but the use of DNA/ancestry websites to identify the Chameleon Killer and the Golden State Killer is fascinating. Edit, just want to clarify since it seems like there's some confusion about how this is done. In both cases, they uploaded the killer's DNA as a fake profile to find family matches. Then they traced the family history from there and narrowed down the suspects by location, date, etc. Once they find a suspect, they test that person's DNA against the initial sample to confirm a match. John Norman Collins used to pick up women on his motorcycle. The bodies of his victims, women, used to be dumped here but they were always washed. Turns out he only killed women who were on their period. Also, he was referred to as John Norman Collins during his trial. He later changed his last name to Chapman, because there was a lawyer in town whose name was John Collins and this was a way to distinguish between them. Brazilian serial killer Little Patty murdered over 40 people in prison. He began by murdering the gang that killed his girlfriend and then stabbing his father, who was in prison for killing his mother, during a visit. He was well liked because he was considered a sort of vigilante avenger, despite killing indiscriminately within prison, no difference between drug possession and a murderer. Because of Brazil's odd sentencing laws, he could only serve a maximum of 30 years, and is currently a YouTuber and ranch hand, I think. Mark Brandon Reed, aka Chopper, was a renowned killer in Australia. However, he only targeted drug dealers and people who made attempts on his life. When he got old, he was told he had liver cancer and had only a few weeks to live. He was asked by the television show 60 Minutes Australia if he wanted one last interview before he died. He accepted. When asked about all the murderers, which he previously claimed as self-defense, not him or he covered them up, he just confessed to all of them, claiming they were never self-defense and he had committed the ones he previously denied. Then he passed away a few weeks later. Went out listing everyone he killed. It shocked everyone. I would suggest looking him up, he's very interesting. Isekai Segawa. a cannibal who was caught in France and pronounced insane. However, after going to a mental asylum in Japan they declared him as being sane. He checked out straight after. He's still free to this day if I remember correctly, and in interviews has stated that he may kill and eat human flesh again. While I was watching the interviews I felt beyond unsettled. Really doesn't make me feel better that he's still out there. In 1985 the Nightstalker was terrorizing LA. I was a young Marine there and a friend asked if me and another guy would come stay the night since her parents had to go out of town. I thought it was silly, he hadn't hit Orange County, but anything to get out of the barracks. That night he hit just a few houses down in Mission Viejo. Some kid heard him and alerted his dad who called the cops. That was the first lead they got. It has always bugged me that I didn't take it seriously at all, and it happened that close. I think we were pretty drunk that night. It was pretty sobering. The most recent one I've studied that's stuck with me is Gary Ridgway. The guy got away with life in prison by giving away the spots where his victims were buried and made the police take him back to the sites to relive the crimes over again. In court videos he just sits like a deer in the headlights as families of his victims tell him he'll burn in hell and other very nasty things understandably. But the father of one of his victims was hardcore Christian and he got up to the stand and said, "Despite everything you've heard today, I believe in Jesus Christ's teachings and he believes in forgiveness, and sir, I forgive you." And it brought the serial killer to tears, to which the judge told him he didn't have a right to fake any form of guilt, which he clearly didn't have. Richard Kuklinski killed a man and left his body in an oil drum outside of a diner just to see how long it would take for someone to investigate. He would order sandwiches from the place and sit on the drum while he ate. He also made a clicking noise with his mouth when he was angry. If you heard that, you were as good as dead. If you like serial killers, UFOs, conspiracy theories, and stuff like that, I can't recommend Last Podcast on the Left enough. It's insanely informative, and also insanely funny. Kuklinski is my favorite episode by them. My grandmother met Ted Bundy on her college campus, and he attempted to get her friend to go off with him. My grandmother said she got a bad vibe from him because he was such a happy person, and she felt like he was forcing the emotion a bit much. Her friend, however, wanted to go with him and was completely blinded by his charm. My grandmother took her friend by the hand and walked away. She said his face changed completely as they did. It's crazy to me that with charm and looks alone, girls were willing to go with him even after several had gone missing or had been found dead.